The Mississippi River doesn't usually keep secrets, but for 2 centuries it held on to one of the most explosive chapters in American history. It's a story of sugar, fire, and a desperate gamble for freedom that the history books tried very hard to forget. Imagine the humidity of a Louisiana January in 1811. The rolling season, the brutal back-breaking window where sugarcane is harvested and boiled into submission, has just ended. At the Destrehan plantation, the massive iron cauldrons are finally cooling. The white overseers and plantation owners have drifted south to New Orleans, drawn by the early calls of Mardi Gras. They thought the enslaved were exhausted. They thought the lull was a time for rest. They may have been wrong. A man named Charles DeLandis, a driver with a bit more mobility than most, had been listening. He'd heard whispers of a place called Haiti, where men who looked like him had toppled an empire. On the night of January 8th, under the cover of cold rain, DeLandis and a small band of rebels struck out, and for 2 days, the largest slave revolt in American history moved like a fever down the riverbank. The end was brutal, the rebellion was crushed, and the retribution was designed to be unforgettable. Then for 200 years, the story went silent, because as it turns out, the only thing more dangerous to the status quo than a revolt is the memory of one. Join us today as we walk through the oaks of the Destrehan plantation, standing where the tribunals were held, and uncovering why this massive uprising was almost scrubbed from the history books. Welcome to Talk with History. I'm your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jen.
Hello.
On this podcast, we give you insights to our history-inspired world travels, YouTube channel journey, and examine history through deeper conversations with the curious, the explorers, and the history lovers out there. All right, Jen. So we had just wrapped up a crazy couple of days of Mardi Gras.
Yes.
I was in recovery mode.
Yes.
Because I was completely overstimulated for the past couple of days.
You were tired.
And so we went to this kind of sleepy little kind of suburb outside of Louisiana. It was about 40 minutes.
You know, what's funny? It was about 45 minutes, but really it was right beside the airport.
Yeah.
There. So
yeah.
we're really not outside of New Orleans.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of traffic.
Yeah, it's just a lot of traffic from downtown New Orleans. So we drove out there. We kind of ended up in the countryside right along the river. We were right on the river to this plantation where, and I had not known this because a lot of people have heard, may have learned about in high school about what's the one that we did our initial video on? Nat Turner. So a lot of people had heard about the Nat Turner Rebellion, but that was kind of nothing compared to what we learned about this 1811 enslaved revolt.
Yeah, I think American history is starting to teach Nat Turner Rebellion because kids will ask, well, did the enslaved ever rebel? And of course, they're always fighting for their freedom. No one's happy in enslavement. No matter what anybody says, they're fighting to be free. And all they have to do is gather but there's a lot of systems in place to keep them from gathering and educating. And Nat Turner is an example of that. But Nat Turner is not the first rebellion and definitely not the biggest. And this is not taught hardly at all. And it kind of is because of the aftermath of it and how they treated the aftermath of it. That's why it's not taught, because there really isn't a lot of information about it. But people will ask me, well, what is the biggest slave uprising? Because we get questions like that. Why didn't, when the Jews were rounded up during the Holocaust, there was much more of them than the Nazis controlling them. Why couldn't they just rally and fight back? Because they're oppressed and they can't organize and understand.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing with the slave revolt, is the organization and understanding that there is more of you if you can get it together. And so this happens in 1811. It happens right outside of New Orleans, but today it's present day New Orleans. And that's why this Destrehan plantation, where we went to visit, is the oldest plantation in New Orleans. And it's one of the oldest houses, but the plantation is the oldest. And right now, it really is the only place you can really visit and explore that is part of this 1811 slave revolt. The Audrey plantation, which is also called Woodland, has been purchased and is supposed to be refurbished as part of this 1811 story, but it hasn't been completed yet.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting once you sat down. So we got down there, right? And it's a beautiful area. I always like kind of just don't think about how beautiful some of these spots are down in the Louisiana area because these Spanish moss, these Spanish oaks with the moss draping and all that stuff just kind of set this beautiful scene. And it was no different at the Destrehan plantation. So we pull up, there's this kind of cute little plantation store that they have. And all the folks that we met, I think the guy up front, his name was Josh or something like that at the front desk.
Or Patrick, yeah. Josh, it was Josh.
Yeah, but he was super helpful and kind of gave us some kind of tips here and there and helped us out a little bit later. And we found out there were some movies filmed there. Yeah. So we'll talk about that towards the end. But got out there, it was just a beautiful setting. So kind of the video guy in me got excited because I could get out here and kind of take some fun video shots and things like that. But I thought once you sat down and started telling the story of why it happened, how it happened, and kind of why it happened when it did was really interesting.
So if you're a fan of the channel, we've done sugar plantations before. We've done Oak Alley, and that is probably the most famous one along the Mississippi River. It's the most photographed one. And so I've talked about this sugar plantation process and what that looks like. And this was no different with these big cauldrons and its access to the Mississippi with its little cutout that's along the Mississippi, but the land goes all the way back with all the acres of sugarcane. And when you harvest sugarcane, it's a huge cane and it's filled with juice, and you have to crush the sugarcane within basically 24 hours of harvesting it so the juice doesn't spoil. And then you take this juice and you boil it. And you're kind of skimming off the top, getting all the impurities out, and you're watching for color change. And once color changes, you cool it down again, and then you boil it again, and you watch for color change, and then you boil it again. And it is a process that becomes more skilled. So the people who do this become very skilled at it, but it's a 24-hour process and it's a long process. You think of all the sugar cane they have to process this way and quickly. And then once it gets to a certain color, it's put into jugs, and then the jugs are dried out. And then that's when the sugar kind of crusts along the jugs, and they pull the tab on the bottom of the jug and the sugar will pour out. So
sounds like it's pretty labor intensive.
It's super labor intensive. It's dangerous. People sometimes get their hands crushed. Even when we talk about Mr. Destrehan, who owned this plantation, his arm got crushed. He was part of it. Like these crushing machines that crush these sugarcane, because it's not just crushed with a mallet. It's these big machines. Sometimes people get complacent. They forget or they get tired and pieces of their bodies get stuck inside. And so it wouldn't be rare to see someone on a sugar plantation without a hand.
Yeah, missing an arm.
And so, yes, it's very labor intensive. And because it's so hard on the body and because it's 24 hours for so many months at a time, the life expectancy of an enslaved person wasn't very long. And so when we talk about sugar plantations, Oak Alley, Whitney Plantation, Destrehan, we want to honor those people who really worked the land. So it was really amazing to see at the Destrehan plantation, they had a primary source document that listed all the enslaved that they had. I'm sure there were many more that were there by their names. And that's rare to see, but it gives them some kind of honor and life to be able to see their name and to say their name. And so that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah. So tell the audience a little bit about this Charles DeLondas gentleman who was a driver. And I was kind of surprised that someone like that who was an enslaved kind of was given this position to be able to travel between plantations.
So Charles DeLondas is from the DeLondas plantation. He is enslaved. He is owned, but given a lot of liberty because his owner is a widow woman. And so she needs basically a male to do a lot of the logistics of the plantation, which is much more than just running the sugar up and down, loading it onto the ships. It's picking up supplies, people, back and forth.
Running the business
all over the coast. So he becomes what they call a driver. He's driving the wagon. He's a driver, right? Like a chauffeur, basically. But because he's doing this and all the logistics of enslaved working each other's land or people borrowing tools and things along the coast, he gets to have communication with the enslaved along the coast. And that's the biggest hurdle when organizing a kind of resistance, is this communication of where do you stand? Where do I stand? What do we know is available to us? What do we understand about what happens along the way? What's our plan after we revolt? What are we going to do? So Charles Delaunus, this is, 1811. Haitian Revolution has happened before that in the turn of the century. And a lot of those people who fled came to New Orleans, and they were free people of color that came to New Orleans.
So that's how that information about it got out.
Yeah, how we did it, how we did this revolt, and that was actually successful. Lots of people died, but very successful. But Haiti still pays for it today. It was never successful that they got up to a standard of living, but they got their freedom. And so it gives people ideas, right? Ideas build. And Charles had this idea. If they could do that there, we can do it here. Yeah. And he got wind of a plantation north of Destrehan called the Audrey Plantation, also Woodlawn, where they held the guns and ammunition for the local militia.
So he started hatching his plan based on what he'd heard about what happened in Haiti with the revolution there. And what he knew he had his contacts, and then he knew this spot where there was a collection of weaponry.
Like an armory.
Yeah.
Okay. And so he thought, well, if we get access to that armory, I can arm the enslaved. We can work our way down to New Orleans. We can get on a ship and we can get our freedom. We can go somewhere. We can go to Haiti. We can go somewhere and be free. And we can do, we can just work our way down and no one will stop us. And again, after the sugar harvest season is over, that's the end of December. And most people, it's why we didn't really do the main house at Destrehan. If you watch our video, you're like, why didn't we do the main house? Because I'm not telling that story. I'm not telling their story.
And they also asked us not to film inside there.
Yes.
Which is fine.
They do photographs and stuff. But most people who, and I want to stress this, even in Oak Alley, who are these upper class rich people, they don't really live on the plantation.
Yeah, not year round.
Yeah, they're going to go to the city. The big mansions in New Orleans are built by these sugar plantation families. They have the money to build the plantations. And who's throwing Mardi Gras, right? Yeah. Who's going to school at Tulane? It's these families that have the money to do those things. So they don't want to come out to their hot sugar plantations and be bored and not have, things to do there. They want to be in the city. And so and if you just listen to our Mardi Gras 12th night, which is January 6th, which starts Mardi Gras, they're in the city to celebrate Mardi Gras. So this happens on January 8th.
Yeah, and that's what I thought was so interesting, to all the pieces that fell into place, right? It's kind of like when it comes to information spreading and information being more available, it's kind of like the printing press, right? Once the printing press got invented and people started reading more, they started being like, oh, I shouldn't be a pauper in England. I should be able to do just what that guy does because I read this book, right? Same thing here. He heard about what happened in Haiti. He had this plan. He was enslaved, which was wrong and didn't want to be that way. And so he planned, this revolt in 1811. And then timing wise, right, that makes more sense now why it's in January, because it's after the sugar season. All that stuff is done. All the rich folks are heading down to Mardi Gras to getting ready to party, for about a month. And that's when he says, okay, it's go time.
So he starts at the Audrey Plantation, which is that plantation, the most north plantation from New Orleans. Now, this takes place along the east coast of the Mississippi, even though it's called the 1811 German Coast Uprising, because the German coast is really considered the west coast of the Mississippi. And we talk about that in the video. They had given these land grants to Germans because once the French and Spanish got out there and realized how hot and muggy and mosquito-y it was, they didn't want to work the land.
I just thought that was so funny that you learned that and you mentioned that in the video, because leave it to the people who are leaving the gorgeous countryside of France, coming down to Louisiana, and they're like, this is hard. I don't want that side of the river. Hey, neighbors over in Germany, if you guys want that, you guys go ahead and take it. We'll let you have it. It's fine.
Yeah. So they had to work it for 3 years. And if you worked it for 3 years, you got the land grant. It was yours. So that was why that was a called the German coast. But it starts on the East Coast at Audrey Plantation, and Mr. Audrey is there with his son. And when they first attack with the enslaved from that plantation, the militia has taken the ammunition and the guns. They're already out practicing with it, but they just make do with whatever weaponry they can find. So think of makeshift tools, hammers and hoes and things along that nature, like spades. And so they actually kill Mr. Audrey's son, and they nail his body to the door as kind of a symbol, like this is started, like we can't go back from this. And they hatchet Mr. Audrey like 3 times with a hatchet, and they think he's dead, and they leave him, but he's not. And so he gets into a boat and gets onto the Mississippi. Again, all of these plantations have direct access to the Mississippi, and starts to get ahead of them and starts to warn plantations along the way, hey, there's a revolt happening. These enslaved are fighting, and they're killing people along the way. Now, as Charles moves down the plantations, those are the only 2 people that are killed because most everyone's gone. But they do gather enslaved as they go. They're gathering slaves as part of the revolt. They say as many as 500 slaves join this revolt. This is why this is the largest slave revolt in America. But they don't kill any more people. It's not like Nat Turner Rebellion. They're not attacking people in their homes because no one's in their homes.
Yeah, because that's what happened with Nat Turner. And I'll link our Nat Turner episode. I think we did a podcast on that. Mm-hmm. I'll link that in the show notes if you guys want to listen to that.
So 2 white men are killed total, and one of them was Audrey's son, right? So he makes it all the way down to New Orleans. And gets a militia, gets people together, just like what happened in Nat Turner. They rally and they say, we have to squash this revolt. So they make it back up north and meet the slave revolt. And they have a big battle that takes place on January 10th. And again, no white people are killed, and they end up killing about 45 enslaved right then. And then they capture everybody else. The militia will kill 45 of them and capture another 45. And everyone else scatters and kind of gets back. So they can't really like pinpoint who was a part of it. They probably all went back to their places and, got back in bed and pretend
I was wondering that because you said that 45, right? The information says 45 were captured, but I was like, well, what about the other,
450?
Yeah, 455 folks. Mm-hmm. Okay.
They scattered
and ran back.
Okay. So how could you, again, because there's no one on the plantation to say that person left, if they can get back, no one would know. Yeah. So of the 45 men they had captured, they hold 3 tribunals. And 2, we know, one is the Cabildo. We have a video from there. That's that building right beside the cathedral and at Jackson Square in New Orleans. And the other one is right on the front lawn of Destrehan Plantation.
Yeah, like right where we were standing.
Right where we were standing. And when they find everyone guilty, it's not really a tribunal. Everyone's found guilty. And they go back to their original plantations for execution. Most of them are executed by firing squad. Some are hanged. All are decapitated. And then their heads are put on spikes. So this is the graphic part of American history. All the way from New Orleans, 60 miles up the river as a deterrent for any enslaved thinking about revolting. But what is also done is this isn't written down, it isn't reported, and it isn't talked about. And they make a conscious effort to do that because they don't want, again, spread ideas.
Yep.
And they don't want this to gain any momentum. And I think that is why it has been overlooked in American history, because it wasn't documented. There wasn't a lot of primary sources about this. It wasn't really passed down. And so it wasn't really talked about. And so now when the evidence comes out and we tell the story now, it really is an important part of American history because the idea doesn't die. Nat Turner will be 20 years after this, and 30 years after that is the Civil War. And even though these things try to get squashed and information and communication tries to get controlled, Nat Turner, the result will be the uneducation of the enslaved, not teaching them to read or write. It doesn't matter. They still find a way. And so I think this is a very important story to tell and an important part of American history. And since we're celebrating America 250, I think it's one of those stories that just deserves remembering. So making it out to that plantation to see it was super cool.
Yeah.
And the people there, I mean, they're welcoming. It was great food.
Yeah, I ran into the curator, right? Gabrielle. She's walking around with her newborn. Right? I think her newborn is about 6 weeks old, a couple months old. And I was walking around with my camera outside. Jenna walked into one of the buildings and was talking to one of the reenactors. Interpreters. And Gabrielle just walks up. She said, "Hey, are you here with a film crew or something?" I was like, "I don't know. We're Walk with History." And she started chit-chatting with me and was super open and welcome. And she's like, "Yeah, film as much as you can." And so she's the curator there. She's been the curator there for a couple of years. And she was telling me about, how much work they put into this place. And it's very well done. Like the outside they've done a great job of kind of putting some good money into it. So it's worth a trip out. And it's nice, especially if you have kids, because you can go outside and they can run around a little bit. But yeah, Gabrielle was great. Josh was great in the entryway there in the little gift shop. And then the couple folks that they had, you can eat lunch there at this little cafe they had. I had the most amazing turkey, avocado, and bacon sandwich. It was so good. I don't know what they put on that thing, man, but it was one of the best sandwiches I had in a really long time.
Yeah, it's amazing to be you're in a spot of a real crossroads of American history, and now they want you to come and visit. They want you to have an experience there, and so they cater to that. They want you to have the tour. They want you to eat some good food there, and they want you to really experience this part of American history, but then what it has become now, and celebrate that they've preserved this home. They need visitors to keep preserving this home and to tell the story. And while we were there, I noticed a movie poster.
Yeah, we sat down for lunch and we're like, what's that movie poster with signatures all over it?
And it was 12 Years a Slave. And it had signatures all over it. And I was like, why do you have the 12 Years a Slave movie poster here? And they're like, because they filmed it right down the road at the mule barn.
Just around the corner.
The part of the plantation is a mule barn, and they filmed 12 Years a Slave at that mule barn. And I'm like, oh, that's cool, right? What other movies were filmed here? And of course, they said Interview with a Vampire. And I was like, oh my God.
If you guys are new listeners to this podcast, Jen is a massive Brad Pitt fan.
Yes. And it's the part of Interview, if you know that movie, where he's walking the dogs, he's walking the poodles. He's already been turned into a vampire, but he hasn't killed a human yet because he refuses to do that. And so he kills the dogs, he eats the dogs. And so I love that part because it's so funny. And that happened right in the front lawn of Destrehan Plantation. They also used the inside for Louis's home, even though they filmed it at Oak Alley as his outside of his house. The inside they used Destrehan Plantation, and they use Kirsten Dunst's bedroom is the upstairs room in Destrehan Plantation. So I thought that was super neat. Now again, we didn't go in the main house. It was built before Destrehan takes it over, and you'll see that in the video. It was built in the 1790s. That's why it's considered one of the oldest. Yeah. And it has a French, even though there was Spanish rule at the time, and it has a French revival architecture. 2 years after the original builder builds it, Destrehan will buy it. And that's why it's named for him. And he becomes one of the first senators of the Louisiana Territory.
I mean, the town is named Destrehan.
Yeah.
Right? So the town is Destrehan, and this is Destrehan Plantation.
It's his home. He's brother-in-law to Barry. He's the guy who starts sugar plantations in Louisiana. Again, he's also connected to Oak Alley. So his brother-in-law helps cultivate the whole sugar plantation industry. So of course he's going to plant sugar there as well. But that is why it's named after him. It's his home. And you can go visit inside and see all of that. But we wanted to tell the story of the people who were outside the plantation. So that's why we didn't really go inside. And we wanted to tell this story of the 1811 slave revolt. Know that some of the people, when they had the Cabildo trial
in like the central New Orleans, in the French Quarter,
they actually hanged them at Jackson Square.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
But there was a 13-year-old boy that they did spare. He only got 30 lashes, but he got it there in Jackson Square. Oof. So that square has seen a lot of history. So when you're in New Orleans and you're walking around, there's a lot of that in New Orleans as well. But it was really great to go to this place and visit it. I recommend it to everybody. If you make it to New Orleans, go to Destrehan Plantation. Not only are you on the oldest plantation in New Orleans, but you're at this location of a crossroads of American history, the largest slave revolt to ever take place in America.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And if you need a good quiet day to walk around and decompress from Mardi Gras, that's a good spot to go. The 1811 uprising didn't fail just because it was suppressed. It set a precedent of resistance that would echo 20 years later with the Nat Turner Rebellion and eventually find its full voice 50 years later in the Civil War. Next time you find yourself south of New Orleans, look past the Spanish Moss and the French Revival columns. Look for the names on the records at Destrehan, the 17 who stood up, and the hundreds who followed because their story is no longer a secret. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
This has been a Walk with History production. Talk with History is created and hosted by me, Scott Benny. Episode researched by Jennifer Benny. Check out the show notes for links and references mentioned in this episode. Talk with History is supported by our community at thehistoryroadtrip.com. Our eternal thanks go out to our lifetime members to help keep us going. Thank you to Doug Liberty, Larry Myers, Patrick Benny, Gail Cooper, Kristen Coates, Calvin Gifford, Courtney Sanini, Gene Noah, Larry Mitchell, Tommy Anderson, Susan Sulis, Bruce Lynch, Dino Garner, Mark Barrett, Don Kennedy, and John Simpson. Make sure you hit that follow button in that podcast player, and we'll talk to you next time.